Okay, now that we're recording, I'm Karen Nelson, president of our MFSA chapter in Oregon-Idaho. Methodist Federation for Social Action is a national, or well, actually international. We now have a chapter in Kenya, in the Nairobi area. But we are an organization that looks at seeking justice through an intersectional lens, looking at lots of different justice issues and how they come together. Our organization is made up of chapters in various annual conferences throughout the United States and one in Kenya. And I would invite you, if you haven't already, to go to oimfsa.org, which I bet Greg's going to put in the chat, and join MFSA. All of our funding comes through memberships, and the funding of part of the funding of our national organization comes through memberships. So there's a range of options there for joining. I just want to take a quick moment to introduce our Oregon-Idaho board members to you. And I didn't even see all of them here, but they're still going to get their names called. Currently, we don't have a vice president. Our secretary is Louise Kinzel. Thank you, Louise. Our treasurer is Jan Nelson, and she actually is in Johannesburg, South Africa right now, attending by invitation an event that just ended called United Methodist Africa Forum. So I did give her a bad time when she got the invitation to go, since it was going to be over this weekend. Our program council rep is Claudia Roberts. I don't see Claudia on the screen at this point. Program council is a part of the national group. Each chapter sends by Zoom a representative to the program council for monthly meetings to share ideas and work on things, and meet together with people throughout the U.S. and Kenya. Our at-large members: Vicki Johnson, Gary Silfies, Greg Nelson, Steve Mitchell, Debbie Malice. So if you are interested in being a part of our board and doing a little more of the planning for events like this, let me know. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. Okay, I said I didn't think I saw Claudia. Is that true? I do not see Claudia.
Correct.
Okay, then I will lead us in a moment of prayer. So let us be in an attitude of prayer. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for your presence here among us this day, and for this opportunity to gather and to hear from our bishop, to share with one another what it means to be people of justice and people who walk with you in all that we do. Guide us, open our ears, open our hearts and our minds as we spend this time together. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. I'm going to give you just a little bit of information about Bishop Bridgeforth. Our bishop was elected in 2022, last November, as a bishop of the Western jurisdiction and assigned to the greater Northwest area. So he is the bishop for Pacific Northwest Conference, Oregon-Idaho Annual Conference, and Alaska. I don't know how you do all that, but our bishop is an Air Force veteran. He's served a number of churches in the California Pacific Conference. has served as a district superintendent, as president of Black Methodist for Church Renewal, BMCR, and as the co-convener of the Interethnic Strategy Development Group. He was also active in MFSA when he was a pastor in Calpac, so he's got some familiarity with our group. He is an author and educator. Haven't had a chance yet, Bishop, to pick up that autobiography, but the title just intrigues me, Alabama Grandson. So there's a whole lot more I could share with you about our bishop, but rather that we listen to him talk to us. I suggest you go to the conference webpage or read one of his books if you'd like to learn more about him. And again, Bishop, thank you for making time to be with us today. I know it's been a busy week, and they probably all are.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, all of them are busy. And to that question of how to do all that, I don't know yet. I go day to day and hope I figure out how to get it done each day. I just said a couple things. One, thank you to MFSA for your leaders and leadership for inviting me to be with you for this time today. And you'll note I'm in my office and my chair, I just keep moving my chair because there's something that goes on with the lights. If something's not moving in here, they go off. And so it's not a nervous twitch. It's just, I want to keep the lights on. So I'll just keep moving. Try to remember to move the chair or my arms or something while we're sharing. So if they go off and you see me do this, it may be the Holy Ghost, but it's probably just me trying to get the lights to come back on. And so I'll just beg your grace and your patience to get with that. As Karen shared, in my time in Calpac, I did participate with our MFSA chapter because that was just sort of by default. Like if you were in ministry, you kind of got pulled in along the way. I don't know when I signed up. I think I just got signed up, and that was just what it was, and just moved ahead throughout my time in ministry, and was grateful for that, grateful for the support of MFSA and helping our delegations figure out what we needed to do or not to do, and also helping to move our annual conference to a place of what was perceived better health through the year. So grateful for that, and wonderful opportunity to share just a little bit with you today. And I was sort of given a blank slate to share, so I really like that. So thanks for that. But I do want to relate what I want to share to your mission and just to where I believe we are as an area, where we are as a denomination, where we are as a nation, and even just as we look around the world with all of the intersecting issues that we are facing. And I appreciate the good work that the MFSA nationally at that time, but now internationally, took on to really be intentional about naming your lens as one around intersectionality and intersectional approaches to your work. Because if all of us were to pause and really examine who we are, we would see that we live at a variety of intersections at all given times. And so I think that's helpful, particularly given where we are politically, theologically, and otherwise. So I think about my own self, think about my own social location and variety of identities. And I feel like I'm what do you say, an abundance of intersectionality just in who I get to be and who I'm called to be in the world. And what I mean by that is I identify as Black or African American. As far as class or economic background, I guess I'd be middle class if you don't include my student loan debt. As far as sex or gender expression, male, man, I use he, him pronouns. As far as orientation, I identify as gay or same gender loving. I'm a Christian. I wear glasses, so that is one of my physical disabilities or abilities that has to have some adjustment and aid along the way. As far as my mental or emotional abilities, I have my moments, as I'm sure some of you do, and I get help when I need it. or when I'm told to. I do speak English, and my nationality and birthplace is the United States. And I share that way, and because I think it's important for us to think about who we are and what makes up all of who we are, both internally, but then also how we're perceived out in the world. Because some of our identities bring greater privilege than others. And I think when we're aware of the privilege we carry within our beings or within whatever positions we may hold, that it can help us recognize that in other people, but then also see who may be missing, who may not have access to power or decisions as well. So just want to put that out there that way, and I think it's fun to do. Now, to get into the body of what I want to share with you today, takes me back to an experience I had when I was in college, and I attended Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama, a historic place in the United States. And but Samford University was started in the late 1800s. It's when I started there, it was a Southern Baptist university, and that the Southern Baptist Convention named the trustees to that school. And in my second semester there, the trustees voted to change that relationship. They wanted to be a self-perpetuating board, basically severing their ties from the Southern Baptist Convention, which was a huge thing for them to do. That was groundbreaking. It was just wild, and people were going nuts. But I could talk to you about 3 or 4 hours about that. But while I was there, I was a religion major, and I received a ministerial scholarship. And as a ministerial scholarship recipient, that required me to participate in a program called H-Day. And what H-Day was a opportunity for students who were on ministerial scholarship to sign up at least once a month. They preferred that you do it at least to do it too, but you had to do it at least once a month. You had to sign up to be an H-Day preacher, which meant you went out to a local church and preached. And the local church would raise an offering, and you would bring it back to the school. And that's how they replenished the ministerial scholarship over the years. And so I signed up and was grateful to be able to do it. I thought I could preach a little bit, so I was like, all right, I can handle this. And so we would meet up in the mornings on the assigned Sunday mornings. We would meet up and carpool to a particular location where we would meet up with a group of pastors who were there, and we'd be assigned out to the churches that we were going to preach and worship and spend a better part of our Sunday with, and then we'd be brought back to that rally point and then drive back to campus. And that's just how it went. Until one of those H-Day opportunities where I signed up, and when we got to the rally point, something was different. And that thing that was different is I was not the only African-American or Black student who was present as a preacher for H-Day. They had changed the program a little bit and had included divinity school students in the program. And so because of that, we had 3 students from the continent of Africa who were attending the Beeson Divinity School on Samford's campus, who were also participating in H-Day. So now that meant that I was not the only Black face. Now there were 4. And so as we met at the rally point and the pastors drove up in all their trucks, and I do believe all of them were driving trucks that day. And so just got to work with the context. And as the presider started, introducing himself and all the pastors around, I heard him say, "I have 4 black shirts." And I kind of looked around and it's like, I don't see anybody wearing a black shirt. And, there was all this conversation, and they assigned us all out, and we went on our way. And as we're riding, I started to realize what he meant by black shirts. Because a conversation that came on the other side of him naming that I have 4 black shirts was, where can they go? And so we were chosen first, and then all the others were assigned. And when I returned back to campus that day, I was incensed in a whole lot of ways, as were a few of the other students who were a part of that experience. And we went to our university minister and shared with him what we had experienced. He was appalled and committed to get to the bottom of it. Now, I can imagine if we were to engage those pastors who were gathered in that circle that day, they would say that they had planned ahead and they thought they had a workable system. I'd imagine that they would say they were being strategic, that they were trying to be smart, they were trying to keep us safe. But I'm also aware that they were in charge of the narrative. They were the ones wielding all the power. They'd probably say they did not intend to do any harm. They'd probably say they did what they thought was best. They'd probably point to all the progress they made to get this far. I mean, look, we're even willing to have them. You've heard that language before. They'd probably point out that no one had ever mentioned this as a problem. They'd probably throw up their hands and say that this is too hard. They'd be challenged to hear me say that their actions and their words were not received in love or with compassion. I can imagine that those pastors, those spiritual leaders would be challenged to hear me say that as I read scripture and reflect upon it, that they are liars and that their way of referring to us and handling us was far from loving. Thus, they're liars. Now, you may say, why in the world would this man call those pastors liars? Well, because I read 1 John 4:19-21 in a particular way. Here it is. We love because God first loved us. Those who say, I love God and hate a brother, sister, or sibling are liars. For those who do not love a brother, sister, or sibling whom they have seen cannot love God, whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from God is this: those who love God must love their brother, sister, and sibling also. Again, 1 John 4:19-21. Don't worry, I'm not going to preach unless the Holy Ghost comes, and that's just what we have to do in the moment. But here's the thing. None of us have to look very far to see that love comes in many forms, that love takes on too many meanings for us to catalog or to capture in this setting, that love is as much a source of joy for some as it is an elusive reality for others. That we know that love has poems, there are songs about love, movies, games, books, and riddles that speak on love's behalf. That love has holy, ancient, contemporary, and futuristic texts to speak of its efficacy. We know that love has advocates and adversaries who can often pass for twins. Yes, love has been as overused as it has been absent in a lifetime of relationships. So I want us to think about that. Think about how often love has been present, but then also how often it's been absent in relationships. We don't even have to go down the roll and call the role of the organizations where we question whether or not love is present or in action in any particular way. And as I was writing this, my mind went back to that Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson song, "The Girl Is Mine," where Michael Jackson says, well, you know, Paul, I'm a lover, not a fighter. That just kept ringing in the back of my mind as I was writing this. But this text in 1 John states it plainly that if we do not love those whom we see, as much as we love the one whom we cannot see, we are liars. And my grandma used to tell us that if you lie, you'll steal. And if you steal, you'll kill. And if you kill, there's no limit to the evil that is possible. So she just challenged us from the beginning, don't lie, right? Because if you start out lying, it'll just snowball and lead to all kinds of other sorts of things. And one of the problems we face in today's world is that there are those who do and say harmful things and profess to do it in the name of love or in the name of God. And love is as twisted as every other construct that we have come to rely on in ages past. And it reminds me of that of a movie. I don't know if it was the 80s or the 90s. I didn't go back and look it up, but there was this movie that starred Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger called Twins. Some of you, I see some of you nodding. You may have seen that, and how we were, our minds, were forced to contort in order for us to buy into this premise that Danny DeVito, and Arnold Schwarzenegger were actually twins. And I think that's a perfect image of what's happening in our world today, that we have two things that don't seem to relate, that many try to pass off as being related and connected in some way. And our minds we're being asked to contort our minds and our hearts in order to make sense of them. It's where two things that don't really go together being put forth as though they do. It's like, where you see the same people supporting corporate bailouts are the same ones fighting student loan forgiveness. Like, I'm struggling to make sense of that in my head, when we have the same people supporting restricted voting laws are the same ones demonizing what's happening in communist China and how their government, functions in some places. It's where we have the same people supporting criminalization of women's bodies and decisions are the same ones finding fault with Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. Like self-determination is self-determination, no matter where it's happening, in my mind, in my world, and in my thought. The same people supporting growing and booming cannabis industries are the same ones insisting that we continue fighting a senseless war on drugs in certain communities. And still criminalizing, folks that for things that others are becoming billionaires behind. The same people supporting funding for opioid addiction in the suburbs are the same ones funding and fighting a war on drugs in our urban centers. That's I'm struggling. Danny DeVito, Arnold Schwarzenegger, not getting that together for me. The same people supporting the January 6th insurrection are the same ones who expelled lawmakers who protest injustice in Tennessee. One's okay and the other is a problem. DeVito and Schwarzenegger, not twins, my friends. They're not. No matter what Hollywood tries to tell you, they are not. I think about this in terms of, how, some are willing to conduct a service of repentance, in fact, insist upon it, but are not open to returning land to native and indigenous people, seeing something somehow wrong with that. Living in a space where equality and equity are treated as though they are the same when they are not. Yeah, those are some twins that are just not matching up for me in some ways that I feel we're being called to see the world, to think about the world, that may be getting in the way of us expressing the love that I believe this text and I believe God Almighty calls for us to express as justice-seeking people. And we find that in John Wesley's preaching, teaching, and writing, that there's this triad that appears repeatedly. And that triad is justice, mercy, and truth. And they are equated with love as expressions of love, because they are how we express holiness, and both personal and social. We see justice, mercy, and truth as the outward expressions or forms of holiness. And we know love is present when justice is present. We know love is present when mercy is present. We know love is present when truth is present. We express our holiness by fighting for justice, extending mercy, and propagating truth. Justice, mercy, and truth are not accidental, and for us, they are not optional. And we don't get to twist them, to make them fit the way we want them to fit. They are expressions of who we are and what we hold dear and core to our being, individually and communally. And that's part of the work of MFSA. That's part of the gift that MFSA has brought to the United Methodist Church and to the broader world, in that this organization has challenged us both individually and communally to seek justice, mercy, and truth. And in this sense, justice, mercy, and truth are not twins. They're triplets, like real triplets, not like DeVito and Schwarzenegger, but real. Like they're real. You can see it. You can see the alignment. It makes sense. You don't have to contort your mind or your being to get there. They emanate from the same source, and that source is holiness, which is and can only be an expression of love from and for God. And we put this up against the 1 John text, and listen to the 1 Corinthians 13 text. That's all about love. We also see that love from and for God cannot be far off from our love for one another. And oftentimes we find this space, or we find ourselves in spaces where we can hear individuals or whole communities talk about how much they love God, but their actions show something differently as it relates to those around them, to their communities, or those who are in great need. And and when we live that way, when our love for God does not show up in our love for one another, then if we're reading this text for what it is, we're liars. And I don't want to be a liar. I don't want you to be a liar either. I want to be a lover, not a liar. I'm just saying. But justice is, just to get into this a little bit, as I read this, think about it, reflect on it, justice is the quality of being just, of righteousness, equitableness, or moral rightness. It's not getting what makes others feel good about what they did for or to you. It's not even getting even or seeking vengeance. Mercy, it's compassionate or kindly forbearance shown toward an offender, an enemy, or other person in one's power, compassion, pity, or benevolence. Mercy is not standing on someone's neck until they no longer resemble themselves. Or weakening them to the point that they can no longer fight. And truth is actuality or actual existence. Truth is not alternative facts or distorted belief that supports my position at the expense of all else. And what I like about this is Wesley's triad of justice, mercy, and truth are lived out by lovers and denied outright by liars. As United Methodists and as Methodist Federation for Social Action, there is a more accessible triad that we can examine as we consider whether or not we are liars or lovers. I mean, we have options. We can be liars or we can be lovers. As an institution, we demonstrate our character as a liar or lover by our policies, our structures, and our behaviors. We demonstrate our character as a liar or as a lover by our policies, our structures, or our behaviors. Our policies are those rules and guidelines that govern what we do, and how we do it tells us and those we encounter and those who examine us if we are liars or lovers. Our policies let us know, and they let the world know if we are liars or lovers. Test this. Liars say we have done our best to include everyone who wanted to be included without acknowledging the power players who set the agenda and control the dialogue to set the policies that are guiding our work and our dialogue. No consideration that Robert's rules are foreign in many cultures, including cultures rooted in the American context. No consideration that equality is injustice because it is built on the premise that everyone begins, grows, and engages the same, and that everyone cannot succeed with the same tools and rules. That's what liars say. As it relates to policies, lovers say equity is the low bar, that we will work to ensure that everyone has what they need to be successful, that we will embed opportunities for revision and correction as we learn more about ourselves, make changes that reflect a more just organization. We'll begin here knowing we have much more work ahead. That's what the lovers say. When you think about our policies, the ways we organize our organization and power structure, they tell us and those who encounter and examine us if we are liars or lovers. The liars will say those who play the game the way it was designed to be played rise to the top. Survival of the fittest. That power rests with those who appeal to the dominant culture's norms and sensibilities. Those who do not look the part or sound like they are outside the norm cannot possibly lead, or those who do not hold degrees from XYZ schools cannot be as skilled and must not be in charge or in control. But the lovers say, when they look at our structures, lovers say, are you willing, able, and ready to meet the demands of the role? Will you join with others and see that all of us move toward fulfillment of our mission and vision without abandoning our values? Will you honor the humanity and dignity of the whole person? See, lovers realize that some people groups' understanding of time and timing is different. It's not wrong, it's just different. Lovers acknowledge that silence speaks loudly and is as much of an invitation as it is a question. Lovers remain curious and seek ways to bring everyone along. We flatten hierarchies and level and dismantle systems that oppress others, even if it means that they have to own their participation in the perpetuation of oppression and abuse. And thirdly, our behaviors, the ways that we speak and engage as we discuss or do our work, tell us and those who encounter and examine us if we are liars or lovers. Liars say, this is how I was raised. This is just the way we talk to each other. That is the way things get done here. That's just who we are. That's how you took it. This is not how I meant or intended it. You're too sensitive. You have to get over that stuff that happened so long ago. You can't make people feel uncomfortable. I never owned any slaves, and I never used the N-word. I don't think your homosexuality is any worse than any other sin. Yeah, that's what the liars say. But lovers say you're a whole person with gifts to share and stories we must hear. You have as much to teach, and we have as much to learn. That we have sinned, that we have not heard the cries of the needy, that we have too often mirrored the culture instead of changing and challenging it. Lovers show up in spaces and sit in the discomfort of stories of atrocities waged on communities that were rendered powerless and denigrated because they did not dominate their oppressors. Lovers invite with expectation that an invitation is not the end, but the beginning. That acceptance of the invitation is not agreement to be ruled and dominated or to assimilate for the sake of partial belonging. Belonging comes long before believing that justice, mercy, and truth are possible. So I believe our work ahead involves examination and alignment of our policies, structures, and behaviors that point us toward a just and equitable organization and society. That we must also ensure that we are doing the work inside our congregations while also calling for change in our context, because it does the next generation very little good if your church is a reconciling congregation or ministry and your community is not safe for its inhabitants to be present and expressive outside the walls of the church. We can't stop at the walls. We can't stop at the doors. We have to go out and ensure that justice, mercy, and truth are present beyond those spaces. What we do inside must matter outside. What we say inside must match what we say and do outside. And what we value inside must be amplified outside. and as much care or precaution taken to ensure that no Black student preacher was ever assigned during H Day to preach at a hostile or unwelcoming congregation must be taken to ensure that queer, non-binary, variously abled, and willing citizen of the world has a chance to speak, to grow, and to advocate for the change that brings equity to their lives. And beloved, just in my few short months in the greater Northwest and moving around Oregon-Idaho spaces, I can see that we've done a pretty good job making space for LGBTQIA clergy in many of our churches. So thank you for that. But we have much more to do in that area. We have much more to do to combat the narrative and the effect of white Christian nationalism in our area. And that includes within the confines of our church spaces. This is not a progressive versus a conservative fight. This is a human rights and human dignity or dignity of the individual battle that must be waged in every space and place that we occupy. And we see protections and sensibilities eroding daily. We see positions and perspectives that were once celebrated now being weaponized. It's a control mechanism and a scare tactic when a person or a group uses woke as a weapon. And this is bad. I mean, but what is unconscionable is when you hear it and your response is, oh, I'm not woke. Well, the translation of that is that you would rather be asleep on the issues and blind to what is happening than you would rather have people who aim to do harm be more accepting of you and your presence. Lovers are woke and aware. Liars are asleep and seemingly unaffected. So are you a lover or a liar? When it comes to immigration reform that allows for free passage of people from death to possibilities of a better life, are you a lover or a liar when it comes to child protections that overly oppose detaining and incarcerating children for circumstances beyond their control or comprehension? Are you a lover or a liar when it comes to women's rights to make their own healthcare choices and decisions, even if they go against what men would prefer? Are you a lover or a liar when it comes to mental health episodes and challenges no longer being criminalized, but treated with expectation of well-being? Are you a lover or a liar when it comes to nations honoring the borders and independence of other sovereign nations? Are you a lover or a liar when it comes to registered voters being allowed to vote in ways that honors their work, education, health, family, and economic realities? See, I've been struggling with this passage and with this question. Am I a lover or a liar? Well, sometimes it depends. Depends on the moment, depends on the context. But as a church, we've talked to ourselves and about ourselves for far too long. The gospel is great and big enough for us to pivot outward and to share it. The mission of the church and the calling upon us is imperative enough that we look out beyond ourselves and find those who are doing the work we value and that aligns with our mission and join them in the doing of justice, extending mercy, and finding truth. This is a challenge and an opportunity for all of us, no matter what color shirt we may wear today, tomorrow, or for all time. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share and know I'm not wearing my black shirt, but I remember it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. There was so much there. What I did forget to say at the very beginning was that we would have some time for questions, and I would invite you, if you're able to do that, to type your question in the chat, and then Vicky's going to kind of take these questions and share them with the bishop and kind of keep us moving forward so that, yeah. so that we can continue the conversation. So if there are some questions that have come up as you have listened to Bishop Bridgeforth this afternoon, go ahead and put those in the chat. And we'll let Vicki share them and kind of pick out which ones come first and second. And what a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
By a lover or a liar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask one while other people are thinking and typing?
Sure. Well, I don't know. Vicki has to answer that. She's in charge now.
Yes, Greg, you may.
You touched upon some institutional pieces there several times about systems and structures. Maybe structures, I know, is a word you used. One of the things I've observed is that we're working at this streamlining process, both in the local church and the conference level. And one of the things that's left us is with a nominating group that is not filling the social justice positions. We have no social justice committee chairs or whatever we want to call them. We used to call it Church and Society, and it has other names. We've had a peace with justice coordinator, but that person, after doing it for many years, retired 2 years ago, I think, and that position has not been filled. So without just putting you on the spot to say, will you fill those? Instead, I guess I'm trying to think about what the right question is. And the question is, should we worry about working through those institutional things, or should we put our energy into working in non-institutional pieces, which is what MFSA is? We work outside the edge of the institution, but nonetheless, we are our own institution and suffer from our own bias and history and blindness. So is there a question in there you could answer? What should the institution do to keep these things going?
Yeah, I hear you, Greg. I think we're just in this point where we're pivoting. And most of us just kind of eyeball in the group. Most of us have been around a while. And, we've gone through the phase where we staffed for everything, and then we shifted to volunteering for everything that we thought was important because we could no longer afford to staff it. And I think what that left was this void, right? Of like, wait a minute, if we're not paying somebody to do it, it's probably not going to happen, which we know is not true because we're all grown folks, which is different from adults. And I can break that down for you from good old Alabama lingo if you want me to. But it's clear to me that grown folks only do what grown folks want to do, right? And so the things that grown folks want to do, they make sure they get done. And so I come from this framework, that says that if justice work is what we really want to be about, then that's what we will be about, right? And we find the way to do that, whether that's with our own sweat equity or we bend the institution to our will through our policy, our structures, and yes, our behaviors in order to align with that. But if we're having to do a whole lot of work to bend ourselves to do justice work, it causes me to question whether or not we're really committed to that. So if we don't have enough people committed to the issues that are, churning at our hearts, then I wonder, do we just need a Tums or a Rolade, or do we really need a vision that's pointing us in the right direction as it relates to some of these issues that I think need our attention? So an even shorter answer to that, I believe we're at a point where, our best effort is to work outside the institution and help the institution see where it can catch up to the movement.
Well, thank you for giving us time on your day off then.
Yeah, sure.
Outside the institution.
We have a question here. It says, Idaho just passed a law that their governor signed that doctors can spend 10 years in prison, and it's a felony to treat medically approved care for transgender kids. Is there some way Oregon churches can help these kids and families so that their kids can continue to receive medical care?
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. And as we see that same sort of tactic being used across the country in many states, and we see it with gender affirming care. And here's the thing, I mean, some of us may look at that and think, well, that's so specific, right? And that only impacts such a small group of people. Well, that's a small way of looking at that. What I want to call your attention to is looking at this and seeing that's a protection. It's a right, if you will, that's being taken away. And if this one can be taken away, then what's next, right? So this may not be yours, but yours may be on the list. And so you need to think about that. And that's why paying attention to all of this across the country is very important. But on the short end, I think just continuing to advocate for the perspective that we prefer with our lawmakers is very helpful. But I think also, partnering with our churches in neighboring states, which you'd have to come west for that, from Idaho, to land in a place that has, some different realities, and maybe helping some of our churches partner together to provide some housing, some rooming, some support for families who need to travel across state lines in order to access some of that care. And really, we're getting ourselves, as we look at abortion rights and we look at trans children's care, which folks will lean itself into PrEP and PEP. It will lean itself into antiretrovirals for HIV. It'll lend itself to all kinds of things, which will then get into your diabetes and blood pressure drugs, and all of these are based off of the same science. So again, a myopic view on this will have us all asleep while our access to what we need to live erodes away. But I think, looking for those places, paying attention to what is possible in Oregon and Washington, particularly California, also, and beginning to look at, and I think MFSA could be one of those groups, because you're present in all those spaces, to look at, creating some asylum spaces for folks to be able to receive that care. We do what we have to do when we want our kids to go to a school in a different school district. We get them an address, right? So there are ways to get folks an address in some other places where they can get that care. And I think MFSA and organizations like it could be helpful in that way.
I have a question. During the pandemic, we had a person on staff on the conference level, I believe. His name was Brett Webb Mitchell, and he was a Presbyterian minister hired with us to address LGBT, I guess, coordination of some sort. And of course, it happened during the pandemic, so he was kind of hemmed as far as what he could do. He ended up doing some kind of coordination, kind of figuring out both clergy and laity, like, who do we have? And then his time was up after a couple of years or whatever, and then he left. And I guess my concern is, obviously we're a conference and a jurisdiction that, that's more, obviously more, that's more positive towards that than, other places. Myself, being a lesbian, it's like, I'm from the Madras area, by the way. Obviously that can't lay at your doorstep all the way. And my concern is that if we don't have somebody or somebody's accountable for that, obviously we have the reconciling movement, but that seems more towards signing up people to be reconciling, not necessarily toward living reconciling. And I guess I have a concern, especially as we move toward the general conference, and then that happens. Like, how will we manage that as far as moving forward? It's a long question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I confessionally, I can name that when Oregon-Idaho launched its work with Brett, and at the same time, CalPAC, put a person in position, a coordinator in position quarter time. And so CalPAC had a quarter time person, and Oregon-Idaho, I think Brett was halftime. But here's the reality there. And we celebrated that. And I think that was a good direction to point in. But here's the reality. And this sort of connects back to my answer from Greg's initial question. The position in Oregon-Idaho was funded externally. The position in CalPAC was funded externally. So the annual conferences themselves did not invest in that. So that raises a question for me about the conference's commitment to it, right? Because our budgets reflect what our true commitments are. And so there's that. So I just want to name that confessionally. And I don't think we all think about it that way. We just think, oh, somebody gave us some money, we can do this thing. That's great. But somebody else then controls your destiny and your direction, right? So if this is truly an area of ministry where we have heart and gut, then that means we also have to put dollars there, right? And that comes from you all. I mean, you all are members of local churches and members of annual conference, and just because you're not chairing a committee doesn't mean you don't have voice, right? And so if it's really where our hearts are, then we are the ones to raise the voice to ensure that the funding and the priorities get aligned in order to support that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question. I struggle with those in my life, my family, and some acquaintances who would fall outside the category of being a lover. I hesitate to call them liars. So I wonder, how can we engage in one another lovingly?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, as I said, for me, it's like, am I a liar or lover? Well, sometimes it depends, right? It depends on what we're talking about. It depends on what we are. And I think that's a good place to start for all of us, right? And it's not just examining other people. It's not really even about examining other people. This is really about examining ourselves and being true and honest with ourselves about ourselves. And I think that sort of transparency, that sort of introspection can help us to approach those difficult conversations with a bit of humility. Now, I'm not saying put all your guards down and just go in and just get ripped to shreds. It's not what I'm saying, but be clear about who you are and what's important, but also know that those you're engaging with, have some truths too, and they may be different from yours. And so a commitment to listen well, is always helpful, and make it more about listening than it is about convincing or changing, because that's not your work. That is not your work. Nobody has called you to convince anybody of anything. Nobody's called you to change anybody in any way. You do not have the power to do that. What you do have the power to do is to do your own introspective work, to humble yourself, and to commit to listening well. And then you can invite others to do that, and then see where you get along the way. The other thing that I have found helpful is to not, be concerned about everybody, whether or not everybody accepts, whether or not everybody understands, whether or not everybody comes along, but can one person, right? Can I have a deep and meaningful conversation and relationship with one person? Can I start there? And if I get that one, then the two of us can work to get another, right? And that seems like a long, hard way to go, but that's doable. That's doable. And it also can make you more accountable for how you engage one another, as opposed to, well, everybody doesn't accept me, everybody doesn't understand, so I just quit. Well, that's a cop-out. and you should lose because you quit. That's a forfeit, right? So for a good sports analogy, it's a forfeit. So that goes in the L column. So, but really, you know, investing in that one space, that one relationship, you know, and taking it one step at a time. It's not about getting everybody and getting it all at once, but what is the one forward step that we can take right now? And it may just be acknowledging that you live and breathe and I live and breathe. And that's where we'll stop today, right? And then we'll move, you know, to another space and another conversation.
And someone wrote, thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Are there any other questions out there?
Yes, I would like to ask a question or make a statement. This is John Schweiber.
Mm-hmm.
Community. Can you hear me?
You're going in and out, John. That's mostly out on my end.
Yeah, mine too. John, you were very clear when you gave us your name, and now you're disappearing on us.
John, can you type your question? Maybe they will get it that way.
You can't hear me?
No.
Do now, give it another try.
I'm John Schweiber, pastor of Metanoia Peace Community.
Hi, John.
Can you hear that? No?
We've lost you again.
Well, I'll have a chance perhaps
Sometimes it helps to turn off.
ask my question when we. Pardon?
Sometimes it helps to turn off your video.
Yeah, John, if you'll hit your stop video button, then that will let us give your bandwidth to your voice.
Okay, can you hear me now? Better. I've got it off.
Yes.
I was interested in your remark about it being easy for us to make statements about reconciliation, but not being willing to give away anything. And our particular congregation is committed to actually, because we see ourselves coming to the end of our congregational life, we want to commit to giving our property to a BIPOC organization. And I'm just hoping that you'll support us in this, and that maybe you'll be able to help the whole conference to be thinking more about how we actually make the sacrifices that are required by for true reconciliation or reparation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's not a question, but just unless it's to say that I'm standing right behind you if you're willing to lead us in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important thing that we just must address. That's all.
Yeah, thank you, John. And your letter is right here on my desk, and I think Rondelay is trying to set a time for us to have a conversation soon. So looking forward to that. And definitely, you know, this work of reparations is it's critical. It's critical for all of us, and it's not something to be afraid of. I think it's something for us to lean into with humility and honesty, right? Anything that invites us to be more clear about who we are and how we do the repair that we can in communities that have been harmed, then the better off we will be going forward. So thank you, John, and the Metanoia family for the offer, and not just for the offer, but for the heart that's behind it, and most definitely looking forward to engaging that work with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Well, we asked Bishop Bridgeforth to offer a question to us so that we could break up into some smaller groups and have a chance to have some conversation about justice seeking, justice issues. And so we're going to listen for the question, and then Greg is going to split us up into some random groups, and we'll have about 20 minutes to have some conversation about whatever the question is.
All right. I have to get back to my question. Where is it? I have to get back to it. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'll drop it there in the chat. But here it is. It's kind of a two-parter. But what's at least one issue you can focus on and demonstrate more justice, mercy, and truth? What's the first step you can take, and who can you invite to join you and support you? So it's a process question, but it's to get you to think about what can you focus on, right? In your group, maybe you can come to some consensus, or maybe you gather a list, who knows? But really just to get you started thinking about what can you focus on. And I believe in when we come up with these ideas lead to plans, and then plans need some deliverables attached to them. So the three parts of that point us in that direction.
Great. Okay, so watch for your breakout group here. Louise or Steve? I've still got both your names down here for leading this reporting back section.
I guess we can tag team it, maybe.
Okay.
So I'm going to read the question again. And Greg, I don't even know how many groups there were. So the question again, or the questions were, what is at least one issue you can focus on and demonstrate more justice, mercy, and truth? What is the first step you can take? And who will you invite to join or support you? And I'm just going to fess up and tell you that group 3 had a really hard time. So let's start with group 1. Who's in group 1, and who do you have a designated person who's going to speak for you?
Steve Mitchell or Paul Nickel want to, maybe you guys were in that room.
Oh, I didn't realize we had group numbers. I managed to copy the question, but I did pay no attention to the group number. I did take a few notes. We struggled like group 3, and we talked mostly about things that we have done. We were joined by Elaine and Amy from Christchurch, Rolf from Morningside, Steve and Monmouth, and myself from Portland First. I think there's some consensus that these projects to be more organic, really actually start with one person, and then it spreads to a second person, and then becomes a group. And Elaine talked about the project that they have called the Christmas Sharing, and it's now this project's gone on for maybe 40 or 50 years, I think she said. It involves all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, from wrapping, purchasing, delivering. It's just a multifaceted thing, but it started with really 1 or 2 people. And so we cycled back to this when we got to the second part of this, and says, what is this first step you will take? And then the first step is that it does begin with 1 person. And we all concluded that it was like the camp song. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. And that's how things happen. Both Elaine and Amy talked about the LGBTQ housing project that's going on at Christchurch, and how that has built over time. And that's going to be housing some 50 odd low income LGBTQ plus people. And it began in the same way. At Portland First and Morningside, we had record of being reconciling congregations, but we're now both kind of sort of mature reconciling congregations, and we struggle with what's the next step and who to invite. So we don't have the answers. This posed for us as many questions as it did answers. And those are my notes from group 1.
Great, thank you. Much appreciated. Steve, do you want to talk to group 2?
Group 2 had Artie Letty, Claudia Roberts, Cruz Santos, Ernie Bell, and Janet Farrell in it.
Go ahead, Artie.
I was going to say, go ahead, Janet. Well, we didn't work on one for the group. We were doing more individual foci. I didn't take very good notes, and so I'm not sure I'm a very good one to report on this. The one I had talked about was at Trinity in Toledo, which is near Siletz, which is a tribal land, and and many years ago there was a Methodist church in Siletz, and it closed, and ours remained open. And I don't know, but I believe there's some hurt feelings that happened in that process, and so I've been wanting to do some bridge work there, and hopefully some healing could happen in that process. So that was the topic I was talking about. And Ernie brought up our little church is, we're still pretty viable, but we are continuing to shrink. And should we get to the point of closing, maybe what Metanoia is talking about with reparations and property, there, maybe there's something there for us and the working with the tribe. I don't know, but that's something to pursue, is as that becomes a viable thing. And Cruz, I was having a hard time hearing because of the sound. And so I can't really, I apologize, I can't really report on what you reported on, Cruz. So I would invite you to bring that to the table. Janet was talking about talking with family who are liars and lovers, and how do you do that, in a way that is meaningful and helpful. And she was talking about, I believe it's called Better Angels, and the model of looking for something you can agree on and go from there to build upon a relationship in terms of what you can agree with. So Cruz,
It's braver angels.
I'm sorry?
Braver angels. Braver
Braver
angels.
Angels. Braver Angels. Okay, excuse me.
Yes, can you all hear me good? I was talking to the group that I participated, that coming from the Latino community, we are always thinking about how is our relationship with our brothers and sisters. And we do a good job specific in that area. But in this conversation with Bishop Cedrick, it's opened my eyes that something that we need to do more intentional is how we begin to work make our structures and policy more open for the Latinx community. And I was thinking, well, what is the next step? The next step, I need to meet with the Latino leaders in our GNW area to begin to ask them to get involved, to be in room and spaces like this one, where people can hear our realities and our context. And I think that is my commitment with this group, going to my Hispanic Latino leaders and begin to invite them to be part of these groups that are opening spaces to hear our voices.
Okay. Thank you so much, Group 2. Group 3, who would like to speak? Karen? I have a lot of questions, but
I thought you had a really good summary.
I had questions.
A lot of what we talked about was how do we help people be aware? I mean, one of the questions that had come up for Bishop Bridgeforth was, you know, how do we help trans families with trans youth and children in Idaho when we have these new laws that have been put in place? And the whole thing of people in Oregon, people maybe that we would even think are fairly up to date on what's going on in the world, are not aware of what, you know, what's really happening. And so that whole thing of, you know, you said it, if this can be taken away, then what's next? And so trying to figure out the ways that we can communicate with people, you know, educate people, help people know what the actual law says instead of what some news outlet tells you it says, or some person who thinks we need that law says it says. And we didn't come up with any really good solutions to how that happens, other than it can't just be, oh, we'll do this little presentation and that will take care of it. That people need to hear things more than once, and they need to be able to engage in conversations about it. So figuring out ways to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
And group 4.
E. Pujad, John Schweibert, Trudy Pollard, Vicki Johnson.
I can speak. I can speak. We had a hard time figuring out if you meant for each of us to have a passion that we cared about, or if you know, we were supposed to come to consensus. And we decided that we each have different passions, and there was no point in trying to agree on a passion. And John's passion. No, let me start with Vicki's passion.
Trudy. Trudy. Remember we talked about food. John and I both talked about food.
Right.
Our passion. Yeah.
Right. And Trudy was talking about a program that her church has where they go to a place where there's a homeless encampment under a bridge and take them food. And they just started doing this. And she's working with this group of people to continue this. She said was it last week that you took?
Yeah, it was our first one. Last Saturday was the 15th. Yeah, it was the first one we did.
And so this, go ahead, you tell about it, Trudy.
It's new for us. We usually do something just on Christmas Day. We deliver socks, hats, and gloves. But we got to talking after our last Christmas, and we talked about people are hungry. And so we need to do something with food. And we didn't want to make it, you know, real complicated and so forth. So we met and we decided our first delivery would be on April the 15th. And so we met at the church. We assembled 50 burritos, and I had bottles of water in my car. So we went down under the steel bridge and handed out the burritos and the water. People were very gracious and very kind and so appreciative. And so we're going to do it again. We're going to make it a regular ministry. That is really kind of my second passion. My first one is some racial justice issues, teaching and learning. But the food thing, folks are hungry. And so I don't want to be selfish with, let's just do what Trudy thinks. We need to help people. And I know we can't help everybody, but if we can fill a few tummies on a regular basis, and, you know, the scripture about I was hungry and you fed me, well, they were hungry and we fed them. They were thirsty and we gave them water. And so we want to continue doing that. And I'm sure there will be people from the community, but outside the church, but there are several within the church that are very dedicated and committed to this ministry. So I think that makes us lovers and not liars.
Absolutely. And John was also talked about food insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes more sense for us to just tell our own thing. John?
Well, what I contributed was that we're going out on a regular basis and taking food. Right now, we're allowed to, but the Quaker Meeting House is a place where people can gather for food. But for a couple of years, we were taking food out to the encampments, like you said, and we found out that it was a lot easier to build relationships with people if we were on their turf instead of ours. So we found it even better than to our church, and we were doing that at Sunnyside Methodist Church. We were so busy getting the food prepared and served and so on that we didn't have as much time to talk with the people, but we found much more time to do that when we actually went to where they live.
Build relationships.
I thought of John Wesley visiting house to house, and we were visiting from tent to tent.
Yeah. And Vicki, your concerns were mental health and LGBTQ issues. Are you there, Vicki? Unmute. You're muted. Oh, there you go.
One of the things that I think we addressed as a commonality in our group was that we all had, or several of us have, several passions, and we agreed that it was good to kind of focus our energies on, one or two, in order to have more of an impact. But yes, I've been a social worker for 25 years or so, and one of my areas of interest is mental health, and another is that of LGBTQ. Another that I have a strong interest in is addressing, I could go on, but Christian nationalism, especially in the area of Central Oregon, is of high importance.
Thank you. And I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you that my passion is justice in Israel-Palestine. And I found our discussion about focusing your passion on one or two things rather than trying to spread yourself too thin really interesting in light of the conversation that came up over a resolution that was discussed last night at the Legislative Assembly, where I have submitted a fairly narrow resolution and somebody wanted to broaden it, and there was some discussion about that, and I hope it will be resolved amicably at the annual conference. But I think when you try to spread yourself too thin, it's hard to do the work. I think it's much better if you, it's like if you've got a certain amount of money that you give to charity, do you give it to one charity where it's going to make a substantial difference, or do you parcel it out to a bunch of different charities? And I mean, there are a number of justice issues that I am passionate about, but I don't have the bandwidth to, be deeply involved with all of them. So I support what I can, and hope other people are taking care of some of the other ones.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is there a group 5?
Yes.
All right, group 5.
Okay. I took notes. If you want me to kind of sum it up, you guys can add on to it if you want to do that. We started off just talking about our justice issues that we're interested in. I, being the Idaho person, I said I'm coming out of a reconciling congregation in Hillview in Boise. I've been working with
my interfaith group, Interfaith Equality Coalition, for justice issues, and we're focusing on right now on transgender rights and all the anti-trans legislation. That's my focus. And somebody mentioned abortion. Yes, that's a big deal in Idaho also. And Chris shared, she's with United Women of Faith. She said they're focusing on climate justice, but specifically justice energy for all, and also the school to prison pipeline. And Sharon mentioned her church is working on families in need. They're doing classrooms for children. They especially have a lot of Hispanic kids, and it's in Morningside. It really helps the community. And then Janelia said she was a little frustrated because she felt she didn't have an issue, but we learned that she's a small congregation, and she was important in they've become reconciling, and she's played a big role in that. So that's a big deal. But we've kind of got onto the frustrations of we discussed the difficulties of being in the small conservative congregation, which is a couple of our people, and being hard to get people are apathetic, and it's really hard to step out in a conservative community. In my situation, we're in a little more progressive community in a very red state, so it's a little different. But we all had frustrations with apathy. I've had that issue with trying to get people to step out. We were an older congregation, and some of us go out into the community and do justice work, and other people support it verbally or on Sundays, and then it's like, get them out. How do you get them out into the community to do something? And that's the harder thing. And we didn't really come up with a solution for that, but that's a really hard thing, is to get people to be active. And someone's commented that social justice is hard. It is hard, and it is frustrating, and we get discouraged, and we have to keep going. But does anybody else want to comment on that? Any of those?
I'll comment.
Yeah.
Well, my passion is church. I like church. And I really like being part of open door churches. In Salem, our churches are connected. And I am really enthusiastic about that. But at Morningside, where I attend, we have several things that have come to fruition. We have a disabilities awareness group, and that's a vital group. And one of the things I talked about was allowing people who have a disability to be in leadership. And that kind of ties in with what the bishop was talking about earlier. And also I talked a little bit about reconciling ministries. We have a very active reconciling ministries, and Jan Nelson is part of our group. But Jan Nelson is a leader, and she's gay. And that makes a difference, and so, and we have people who are involved in the tiny house movement for the homeless, and Open Door Churches has a food ministry that they do one Saturday a month, and all of our churches are invited to be part of that. And that's something that's outreach to the community. And at Morningside, we have 4 12-step groups in our building that meet during the week. And that's been very fruitful. And one of the leaders of that is a counselor that has counseling sessions in the church. But the big thing that I'm super enthusiastic about is family building blocks. And some of you may have heard of family building blocks, but that's an outreach to families. And we have 2 new classrooms that were built on our property. And I am now a teacher assistant. And I taught music, and I also taught young children in my other life. But it was just so wonderful to volunteer to do that. And their philosophy is all are accepted in this program. It's an outreach to families, but the object is to help families stay together and provide the resources for them. The children have opportunities in these classrooms that they would never have otherwise because they're very economically challenged. So that's, really cool. And and we just redid our kitchen. That was a big, huge, challenging project, but it makes it possible for family building blocks to come in and feed families in the community. So, I love my church. We did talk about, and we do have through Open Door Churches, we have had 2 offerings this year on racial justice classics, and those have been well attended, and so it's really good. But I've been so busy with my church in so many ways, it's hard for me to volunteer for other things. But I really love it. I spent 35 years in Alaska and was part of Aldersgate United Methodist Church in Juneau. But I love church, and I'm glad I came today to hear the bishop. It was a real fruitful time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, there's lots going on.
Yeah.
You guys are doing good work. Greg, is there another group?
No.
Okay. So Bishop, I guess my question would be to you. How do you respond to all of this? Some of us with a lot of questions, a lot of people out there doing a lot of really good work. How can we build each other up and pull this maybe a little bit more together? Or should we?
Yeah, I think it's great, and thank you for all of you who shared, and really appreciate those who were able to name, the stuckness, right? Like you feel stuck in some places. That's an offering. So thank you for that. It's good to be able to know that and be able to name it. It's nothing worse than being stuck and not knowing it, right? Because the rest of us see it, and now you get to see it. So thank you for that. But I find, hearing, and maybe we could, if we had a poll, we could test this out. I would be willing to bet you that, I'm sorry, we're in a Methodist gathering, can't bet. Yes, I'd be willing to guess that, even in hearing people talk about some of their passions and some of the work that they're engaged with, that those who felt like they didn't have anything to offer, didn't really know where to land, that even hearing that brought some things to mind, right? And so I would say, as those things, have come to mind, write it down and, connect with those who are doing it and be curious, right? Be curious. And those who are sought out and those who are called on to give more information, receive the questions with curiosity as well. And don't assume because a person is asking you about something that they're coming to sign up. Just receive their curiosity as curiosity and be curious about why they're asking or why they're inquiring, and find out where their passions are, right? And your enthusiasm, your commitment may be exactly what they need in order for them to identify their own passion and enthusiasm. And they may discover that just from being in conversation with you. They may never discover it by being co-opted into what you've pulled them into. So just, remaining curious as you inquire, but then also as you receive inquiry, I would say would be very important for us individually, but then also, from an organizational level. So as MFSA looks at all the plethora of issues that you could take on, remain curious about what other bodies are engaged with, ask questions about how they came to those decisions and engage that way. And I believe it works the same organizationally as well, to just retain that curiosity and let that guide you to what is helpful and what's next.
Thank you. This has been a rich and powerful 2 hours. Thank you to all of those who joined us today, and to Bishop Bridgeforth for being with us today and speaking to us. Before he sends us out with a prayer, do have a couple of announcements. Board members, don't leave the call. For those of you, the rest of you who are with us today, if you are going to be with us at annual conference at the beginning of June, watch for some information about our presence there. That's the next piece we have to finish working out here. For those of you who maybe are not traveling to Idaho, I know there will be some things online that will be a way for you to connect to annual conference as well. So keep doing your justice work. And there's a reminder in the chat about how you can become a member of MFSA. And board members, don't leave the call. Okay.
Is that my cue, Karen? All right, awesome. Yeah, well, thank you for this time that you've gifted unto me to be with you. Grateful for it, and anytime I can be present with you, I'll definitely make the effort to do that. I put a link in the chat here. I'm going to share a closing blessing prayer that's crafted by Howard Thurman, and the reference is there if you would like to refer to it another time. Louise, was that Louise that was proctoring the last? Yeah, the last another piece of that I failed to offer in my answer to your question about my questions was that, you know, a lot of what you're naming is right in line with our conference theme of go and do likewise. Like, you're already going, you're already doing. And so we'll need those stories. We'll need you to continue to tell those stories and lift those up as we go into our work into the coming year and seasons ahead, so that we can inspire and invite others to come along. So thank you for that as well. So let me offer this. There's prayer for us. I didn't write it, so you can keep your eyes open for it. Mine will be open because I'll be reading it. And it's just as holy to pray with your eyes open as it is for you to close them. So, but if the only way you feel you connect is by closing your eyes and bowing your head, then you do that. But hear this prayer. Our little lives, our big problems, these we place upon thy altar. The quietness in thy temple of silence again and again rebuffs us. For some, there is no discipline to hold them steady in the waiting, and the minds reject the noiseless invasion of thy spirit. For some, there is no will to offer what is central in the thoughts. The confusion is so manifest. There is no starting place to take hold. For some, the evils of the world tear down all concentrations and scatter the focus of the high resolves. War and the threat of war has covered us with heavy shadows, making the days big with forebodings, the nights crowded with frenzied dreams and restless churnings. We do not know how to do what we know to do. We do not know how to be what we know to be. Our little lives, our big problems, these we place upon thy altar. Brood over our spirits, our Father. Blow upon whatever dream thou hast for us, that there may glow once again upon our hearts the light from thy altar. Pour out upon us whatever our spirits need of shock, of lift, of release, that we may find strength for these days, courage and hope for tomorrow. In confidence we rest in thy sustaining grace, which makes possible triumph in defeat, gain in loss, and love in hate. We rejoice this day to say, our little lives, our big problems, these we place upon thy altar. Amen. Go in peace, friends, and board members remain on the line. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.